Hey guys, so I had the absolute amazing privilege to be able to interview Nathan Carroll, an amazing founder from a professional surfer over at Hawaii to finding his company at QuickaPay and then moving over to RapidPay. Uh, Absolutely amazing privilege once again to be interviewing him, and I hope you guys enjoyed the interview. Hi Nathan, how are you?
I'm very good, Rashid. How are you?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to have this interview with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to.
Yes. So I have the recording on just so that I could upload it onto YouTube. If you're okay with that.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So just to dive right into it, just doing a bit of research onto you, I noticed that you were a surfer at Hawaii for about 10 years or so. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I grew up in a tiny little island in Hawaii, and then the surfer mecca of the world, if you will.
Yeah.
And yeah, started my career as a professional surfer, which is not super common, but it was an awesome experience and learned a lot from it.
Yeah. So how did you end up making the jump from professional surfer into finance?
Um, I've always been interested in like math, numbers, and investing. I've done quite a bit in the stock market over the years, and yeah, kind of just naturally in school, math was always a subject I found very easy. It's something my numbers just make sense to me, so that's where I yeah started working on there. It wasn't a straightforward shoot. Went to university and did all the hard yards to get into the space, but yeah, it's been an awesome journey. Definitely learned a lot, but I think the thing is just you gotta work really hard to and go after what you want.
Yes, I completely agree. As a founder, when you feel naturally drawn to something, you just want to pursue it. And with QuickaPay, you found that with Nick. So did you previously know each other upon starting uh, the company, and how did you guys meet?
That is a great question. So Nick and I actually met through the Antler Venture Capital incubator program that they launched in Sydney. So we were part of their first inaugural Sydney cohort, so SID1 as they call it. And ultimately, I had gone to a number of the basically, I guess, kind of like speed dating events beforehand where they had cocktail parties. You can meet potential founders, get to know each other, talk about things you're both mutually interested in, problems in the market that you see that you would love to be able to solve. And yeah, Nick and I, we came in with the both with the same goal of building a business and having a quick exit. And ultimately, we kept landing on the idea of cash flow for small businesses. And after speeding, everyone we kind of looked around and said like, nah, let's do this. And after a handshake in the hallway, the rest is history.
Wow. Yeah, that is quite interesting. A lot of investors would say that often don't go into a company with someone that you just met. So really, it's the fact that you guys were able to not only kick it off in the first couple of, would you say the first couple interactions, or did that take a bit of time until you were into it?
It was probably a 2 month end-to-end process before we really did it. But one thing that we did, we're a bit more mature. So we've been through high growth startups and seen things that we like and things that we go, no, we'll never do that. So we've unfortunately learned a lot of lessons. And ultimately for us, we did actually a really deep dive in terms of like, what are our personal values? What drives and motivate us? How would we define our team culture? How do we define our roles and responsibilities? What do we do when we reach conflict? So we did like a basically like a super detailed about you. I know everything about him from his personal relationships to his current financial situation, and we went through all of it. It's very long, very tedious, and it was a bit. We had to probe each other quite a bit, but ultimately, we're in it for the right reason, and we wanted to make sure that we can make it work. Because most startups fail because of disagreements between founders, and we are very conscious of that. But one of our values from day one was disagree but commit, and that's something that we do to this day. We might disagree on things, but ultimately we'll commit, and we will both do everything we can to making sure it's a success.
Mm. Yeah, I see. And did you have the intention of looking for a co-founder, or did you go with I know Antler, when they started in 2019, you guys are in their first batch. And also, as congrats to you guys as well, you were the first company of the 50 to be acquired. So did you go in with the mindset to look for a co-founder? A lot of startup founders often start up as a solo founder, and the journey is often hard. So did you go with the mindset of looking for a co-founder, or just with the just meeting people in general?
Um, I went in with the mindset that I wanted to meet a co-founder. I'm not a software engineer, and I've become technical, but I wasn't very technical prior to going into this. And but I didn't want to, some people start a business and they go in and say, I'm gonna get a co-founder. I just want someone to write the code and I'm gonna do all the fun stuff. It's not how it works. You're looking for an employee. You're not actually looking for a co-founder where, you have highs and lows, but you share them together. And you need to have complementary skill sets and not being afraid to, be upfront with each other. And so I went in with mindset that wasn't looking for an employee. I was generally looking for someone that could complement things that I didn't know, and I could complement things he didn't know. But ultimately, we treated the business as the founders, joint founders in the business. And to me, that was super important. And for Nick, it was super important, and that's what we built the business around, was focusing on that partnership, treating each other like equals all throughout the business, from investor meetings through to all the different things we did. And that was really important to us from day one.
Oh, very important for day one. So you went from going from professional surfing to going into finance through Antler, finding your co-founder, and then starting QuickaPay. How did you go or start with finding your first initial users, the initial customers for the product?
So funny enough, we actually used Airtasker to find our first customers, which was great. So we actually, we reached out and chatted to different customers through Airtasker and paid people for the time. And then from there, we did some different marketing campaigns to test things. So built a number of different landing pages and drew people on and said, register your interest, based on what we were selling, and chatted to them. So lots of times on the phone. So a combination of using Airtasker to pay gig workers who are our original target market. They weren't at the end, but to start off, they were the target market. And then ultimately, reaching out to them through either direct outreach or doing digital marketing to then try and drive a name and number to speak to them and find out, how they run their business and does what we're pitching solve a problem for them.
And what were some of the key some of the KPIs that you initially wanted to track with user engagement when you're talking to the first few customers that you got through Airtasker, and then follow through with some of the advertising that you got?
In the early stages, to be honest, we didn't really set very hard metrics. The only thing we really cared about is we wanted to get to the point where we have 10 users using the product every single day. And that's what we wanted to get to. So we kept it really light, really simple. And, in the early stages of a business, you often go through 3 or 4 or 5, sometimes 6 pivots over the course of the life cycle, right? So it's, the original idea we went in with was not the original idea we landed on 2 years later, right? It's you, as a founder, you have to be very humble going in. You might have this brilliant idea that, oh, this is going to be so awesome, and you fall in love with the solution instead of falling in love with the problem. And then your customers telling you how they want to solve it, and you're testing different things with them to find that common thread that makes things stick. And when you find that, then you have your product market fit.
And would you say that finding product market fit was easier than or harder being a founder? If you compare, for instance, you were previously the CEO of Valiant Finance. That was already established. And then when you went and you started QuickaPay, how did you find that small difference with product iteration, like just improving on the products?
Yeah, so when I joined Valiant, it was the two founders and about 10 people in a tiny little shared office space. So I joined them as the COO. And ultimately, they just recently closed a seed round. They're gearing up for Series A. So I got to join from their infancy stages, and then stayed with them through to they had just completed their Series C, I think it was, or about to close the Series C before I left to found Quicka. So I got to go through the journey and learn a lot of lessons there, but also bring, I gained some previous skills at Prospa when I think I joined them at a Series B and they're going through to their Series D stage. So I watched the business scale from 70 people starting to have more defined roles to then having super defined roles, very, bandwidth, and get very good at just basically running the business instead of building the business. Whereas Valiant, it's all about changing mindset to building the business, building those original processes, trying to make some resemblance of a structure or processes that you could then start to measure. Because if you have everyone operating to them beat of their drum or selling in their own way, you cannot, all the metrics and data you get is completely useless. Right. So you have to do the same thing and then iterate on that, but market from day one. And that's what I focused on. And that was something that I learned. And even from a founding stage, it's you got to figure out how to what your customers want and how to get customers. That's the most important thing, right? Can I find customers at a reasonable rate and they like what we're selling, and will they use it? What is the minimum thing I can get to them? So it's almost that before stage, and then you can start to roll out more structured approaches to how you do stuff. But in the early stage, it's very much, you can, until you have 1,000 customers, you don't know what you're doing or building or selling, to be honest.
Yes, and when engaging with customers and your users, how did you find customer churn when you started seeing customers weren't using your product the way you wanted them to use it? How did you go about making the choice to change it? Some founders would be often stubborn to stick with their process, while others consider to pivot in the sense that keep the problem, but change the way that you solve the problem, change the solution. So how did you find customer churn and how did you deal with that?
Customer churn is never easy. It's always a tricky thing, right? It's, you have customers that you want to onboard, customers you want to win over, customers that you don't want to lose. And again, I think, early stage, first time founder, you love the solution, you don't love the problem. So for the first year, we're in love with the solution, not the problem. Second year, we're in love with the problem, not the solution. And that's when we started to see things really change and transition. And it's oftentimes, you're a founder, you think you know everything, you've been working in the industry for a certain amount of time, but to be honest, when you're the one calling the shots, you learn so much more. And that was the big thing is, not being stuck on what you have today. You have to, if you want to build a business, it's not about what you want, it's about what your customers want. And as soon as you start to understand that, and as soon as their problems become your problems, your whole mindset and your whole strategy and whole approach for building and growing a business changes.
Yes, it does change. And often we have to really keep the customers at the center of our minds. But behind every company success is the team and the company culture in the early days. Do you mind just going into depth about how you went about getting your team and establishing the culture of the company in the early days?
Yeah. So in the earlier days, we set up with, we had for every team member and just for the business, we set up a really clear, what is our vision, what is our mission, what are our values. Those were the first thing that we did is set up really clear. Everyone coming in knew exactly what the vision was. They knew what our mission was, and they knew what our values and what our values represented to us. And we would test them over time. But ultimately, you want to bring, in the early days, you want to bring people into the business that are aligned to your values. But I think that becomes more important down the track as you build, grow, and scale, because ultimately your culture, the people you bring on the early days aren't necessarily the right people to stick with you for the entire journey. There's some people that are good at running a business. Other people are good at building a business. People in the early days, You need people that are expert generalists, not specialists, that are good at building, very hands-on. And they could be good culturally, could not, but more importantly, you need people with the skills to build. And that is more important than having you all share the same culture. You can share the culture to some degree, but as long as you're aligned around your vision and mission, that is the most important part, because that's what ties everyone together. Everyone needs to buy into it. And then from there, as you build more and more people, then your values become more important. And then culture becomes more important. But, for the first 5, it's great to have a tight-knit culture, but more importantly, you just need people to buy into what you're convincing them to leave their high-paying job to take a, startup salary for.
Yes. And you mentioned you need generalists, not specialists. In the early days, I also experienced this myself. We often find ourselves doing multiple roles that's not in our core expertise. Would you say that is a must in the early days, and or you can often get away with that? Like, how long can you keep that nimble side of, like, you can be a generalist? Like, can you do that throughout the life of the company, or does it get to a stage where that will start to stagger if everybody is able to be able to be generalists in their fields? For example, if someone is in marketing and then they expand into a different role, whether it be user engagements, or even though it's quite similar, but marketing special, just spreading the word, or into sales, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think naturally people, generalists, you either become really passionate about one thing, and that comes out over the startup journey, or, from working in a role, you find that you tend to gravitate towards certain problems or certain projects or things like that. So there's a natural evolution for each person, but ultimately, generalists are fantastic for early stage companies. They're not necessarily great for bigger businesses, because you need to be specialized. Like, there could be, if you've been doing sales for 20 years at, high growth to startups, you would have learned a ton of lessons versus someone that's just done sales for, a startup. Whereas the sales process for a startup would be very different, right? You're hands-on doing it all. Whereas, at a more enterprise level, it's like, no, we have this team that does this team that does this, that team that does that. And that's ultimately where you need people that are very good at finding leads, very good people that are very good at just winning leads, people that are really good at just keeping customers happy, and then, marketing and sales to then grow our customer base, so you have to move into that flywheel effect and become specialized. And that relates to every role. A junior, early days, software engineer, you need to be able to get your hands dirty. You got to know DevOps. You need to know a little front end. You need to know some back end. You need to know, how to build structure APIs and the software architecture, kind of as a whole. You don't need to be an expert, but you need to have some working knowledge. Whereas later on down the track, you can simply be a front-end engineer and just do front-end dev work. So it's and same with marketing. I think it's relatable to all the different key functions of a business, but the bigger you become, the more complex the business becomes, which means then you need really good operators that are specialists in one or two things, and they're very, very, very good at it.
Yeah, indeed, the bigger you get, it does get a bit more complex. Why did you make the decision, like as a team, or just in terms of management wise, to move over to getting acquired by RapidPay? Often some founders would like to just keep expanding and try to grow as fast as they can. Others try to go different routes. So what made you decide to go into a more traditional, like getting acquired by RapidPay?
So I think the whole RapidPay thing came about as actually just an introduction from one of my friends to our now CEO, in a casual conversation, saying, "Oh, what are you guys up to? Oh, what are you guys up to?" We weren't going to market looking to sell the company. It wasn't. We were just starting to really find our stride. We're really starting to grow. Things were actually starting to work, which was awesome. But yeah, we just weren't in a position. We weren't looking. But ultimately, the one thing that we aligned on is we share the same vision. And funny enough for us, the legal market was the market that was growing the fastest organically. They're our biggest user base. They're our biggest advocates. And they were really liking what we had built. However, if you really want to get scale, you need to have, SaaS partners and deep relationships with them. And that's one thing that RapidPay brought to the table is ATI Group has 30,000 law firms around the globe, and they do payments exceptionally well. And payments for us was just an add-on, but we're really focusing on a BNPL product that could cater to services, which is very different to retail. It's a very different customer, different mindset, different risk model, all the components that go into it. And it just started, one conversation led to another, and then it just made sense. And the opportunity of being able to work together to really do something incredible for a specific industry was just too good to pass up. And we get along very well with the team, so it's very much I wouldn't say it's just an acquisition. It's more of a new partnership where we're building something together under the RapidPay brand, because it's been around for a while. People have heard of it. They know about it in the legal space. So, we're very aligned in working together to build an awesome product for law firms around the world.
That's quite fantastic. And how did you find your role changing from when you were at QuickaPay, moving over to now your new role over at RapidPay?
Look, there's change, right? It's you're going to be resistant to change and fight the change. There's change for both our team and the RapidPay team, right? We brought in a group CEO to look after. We're launching a new product and market as well, and a new brand, and we've got our brands that we're combining and winding down and merging, and then relaunching with something that's going to be really cool and exciting soon. So there's a lot of us probably stepping on each other's toes a little bit to start, but that's because we're just trying to find our feet and figure out how we get into a really good rhythm. And to be honest, it takes 6 to 12 months to do. And we're now at the point where we are starting to find that rhythm. And I think the biggest thing is that we all had to come into it, had to drop our egos, had to drop, I know this and this and this, to go and say, cool, you want to do that? Tell me why. And you have to listen. You might not want to listen, but you need to listen to the other person. And that's what we really tried to do as a leadership team. As we formed the newly formed executive team, was just to listen to each other and understand why we shouldn't do it. And then ultimately use data to break any tiebreakers or bias. And that's what we've been working on is using data to drive our decisions and bring us closer together as a team.
Yes. And when you go about making decisions, how would decision making changed from QuickaPay and now into RapidPay? I presume when you were in QuickaPay, if you wanted to make a decision, it will be as quick as within a couple hours to a day or so. Has that changed? Is making decisions now, like for example, if you want to do launch a product or make a change to a product, does it change now? Do you have to go through steps? And if there are steps to go through, what sort of steps would you have to go through?
That is a very good question. And this is something that we're currently working through at the moment, is because RapidPay was, in a sense, it's a 7-year-old business, but it's really been treated as a startup within a big business, right? And it's spun out. So we're now our own brand, our own entity, everything, all owned by the same parent company, but we're really our own brand and company, which is really what direction that they wanted to go. And, luckily we had to be a part of it. But, in terms of, just, I guess, bringing it together and moving from, as a startup, we, had a couple hundred customers. It was easy to make changes. People wouldn't get really upset. But at the same time, we only had a couple hundred customers. They were using us a lot, like more than the average payment company, which was really cool to see. Like our average yield per merchant was much higher than the industry. But we only had a few hundred. So if we get to, RapidPay has got, a couple thousand customers. So every change, it might not impact, 20%, but 20% will impact, and they'll complain. That could be a couple hundred customers or a couple thousand customers, depending on the market that we're in. And so it's a balancing act. You got to talk to them, you got to prep them, you got to say, hey, there's this new release coming out. It's going to be really awesome. You're going to love it. Hope you like it. Do you not like it? Why don't you like it? So we got to do a lot more customer research, more surveys, more information versus just shooting. We talk to 10 people and say, there's a trend, let's do it, let's implement it. And, if it doesn't work, we'll recall it. We can't do that. We have to identify what's working, make sure it's working, and then roll it out. So it slows down the decision-making process. There's more stakeholders involved that you need to work with. But, we still, compared to a lot of enterprises, we still move very quickly, and we really are moving, trying to keep that agile methodology and thinking where, if customers are telling us one thing, we can roll it out for them tomorrow. And that's the direction that we're moving.
Yeah, wow, that's quite fantastic. I often find that the process one takes, or rather a company takes in doing a decision, moving a product, the process in which they do that can either be beneficial for the company long term, or it can be disastrous in a way. Would you say that it's as a company grows from a startup, whether they get acquired or whether they continue moving on and grow further, is it in a way uninventable? Like you can't prevent but to have like a slowdown in the process, like how you make decisions? Does it always have to move into like you have to go through these steps? Is it always like that? Do you have to go through these steps? Like, for example, you would have to analyze and explain yourself why are these necessary for startup founders to be thinking about as their company grows?
I mean, in the startup founder stage, you gotta be iterating daily, a couple times a day, right? You can't just, do all the research and then go and spend 2 months building. It's got to be a bunch, one little thing after the other. When you get bigger, you can slow that down slightly. You still need to keep that release. Like we release updates daily, like every couple hours is a new piece of code or something going out, right? It's continuous deployment, which is the modern way to build technology. And it's a lot better because then it's really easy to revert without losing data or impacting your customers. Whereas, you could spend a month building something, release it, do all the UA testing and, all the, all the different types of testing you want, staging environments and all that. But there's nothing better than the real environment and real customers. And you need to be able to release in that, because oftentimes the staging environment doesn't match the actual real-time environment, and it's different anyway. So, you say that it's going to work, but it doesn't. So, it's just the different approaches to it. And, you still need to be able to release continuous releasement and, but you got to make sure that you qualify it. I can't just be 5 customers tell you something and then you roll it out. You need, a couple hundred customers to be saying the same thing. So just getting more customers to confirm what a few customers are saying, because, the last thing you want to do is build products or ship features for 1% of your user base. You want to ship it for the other 90%. Those are your real loyal customers, the ones that matter.
Yes, absolutely. And I understand we're almost out of time. A quick last question, maybe 2 last questions, if that's all right, is one, why did you initially choose to go forward with Antler? For some startup founders that get invites or they see Antler on social media, whether it's LinkedIn or whether it's Twitter, why did you choose to go forward with Antler initially? There are a couple other accelerators, VC seeds like StartMate that are out there.
Mm-hmm. But there's obviously quite a few. Everyone's got their pick of the litter. Focus on this, focus on that. I think the one thing that Antler does exceptionally well is find talented people. They don't tell you what to build. You don't have to come into it with an idea or a project, whatever it is. They bring smart people together. They create an environment for you to test crazy hypotheses. They open windows to people that you might not be able to get intros to. So they have an incredible advisor network. So you can really quickly validate things that are relevant or important or not, and kill them equally as fast. And that's something you just can't find anywhere else. The network and the advisor network at Antler is second to none, in my opinion. And, they do help a lot of people that are maybe looking for a founder. If you have a founder and an idea and all these things, like maybe it is, maybe it's not the right thing for you. But, going into it, I was looking at it from the lens of, I get to test a bunch of crazy ideas with some really smart people. It's going to be the first cohort, so they're going to make it a really, really big deal in Australia, which they did, which was awesome. And ultimately they're going to be heavily invested in our success. So if there ever was a time to do it, it was then. Could have waited to see what the first one did and join the second one, but I prefer to be more of a risk taker, and I figured the risk takers would be in the first one, not the second one. So I decided to take a punt and see what happens.
That is absolutely fantastic. Having a strong base around really encourages to keep going. And the last quick question I would ask is, what's an advice that you would like to give to founders that are watching this?
I think if there's one thing, I think that the number one thing to me is love the problem, don't love the solution. It's so simple, you hear it all the time, but love the problem and let your customers tell you how they want to solve it, and look for the things that they're not saying, because that's what matters. What they're saying, the good, the bad, with any NPS score, it's the things they don't say are the things that really matter, and get really good at unpicking that and coming up with solutions for that. And don't be hung up on your ideas. It's not about you, it's about them. And the sooner you understand that and can embrace that, the better off your startup is going to be.
Oh, wow. Absolutely fantastic advice. Thanks so much, Nathan, for taking the time to have this interview. I wish you all the best. And hopefully, if we ever meet in person, I'd love to come and say hi to you as well.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Rashid. Appreciate it, mate. And really, really great to meet you, and have a great, awesome day.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nathan. Likewise. Take care. See ya.